Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the ETQ Reliance Quality Solution Series. This one is on streamlining your audits process. This is the second in a series of product-related and support type webinars that we're doing to help you understand the value that different areas of the quality management system, what they can do for you. My name is David Isaacson. I am the Vice President of Product Marketing for ETQ, and I'm joined by Tom Barlow. You can see our pictures at the top, and you can now also on the second slide here, Tom, if you can go ahead and push. You'll be able to see our pictures in a moment, but before we get into that, let me just mention that from a logistics perspective, this is being recorded. All registrants will get a copy, so everybody on this call will get a copy of the webinar. If you have questions during the session today, please feel free to ask them using the GoToWebinar widget on the right-hand side of your screen. Use the Q&A button there and drop in a question, and we'll get to as many as we can. So as I said, I'm joined by Tom Barlow, who is a strategic solutions engineer, and Tom will be getting more into detail of our audits management process and what it means in relationship to our quality management system, ETQ Reliance. But before we do that, I just want to start by presenting why we're even here to talk about audits management and the challenges that go along with that. Here are just a number of different challenges that we have heard from our customers that arise with the audit process that they have seen over time. Things like wasting time just doing audit prep. You know an audit's coming up. How do you find all the information you need? How do you even know all the information you're going to need? What's that auditor going to ask? Or you might have multiple systems that have duplicate pieces of information or inconsistent pieces of information. How do you know what the right information is? How do you have visibility into your suppliers that you can get the information you need to address any particular audit questions? We do audits. I'm sure everybody here on this call has audits. At ETQ, we do audits and get audited all the time. Using QMS allows us to have that information at our fingertips when we need it. A couple years ago, when the pandemic first hit, we got a call shortly after a lot of companies closed down and wouldn't let people into the office. And the call came from the quality team. They were looking for a solution that would allow them to do audits remotely. They were looking for a solution that took the audit information, the paper logs and the paper documents they had that were sitting in a file cabinet in their office that they were not allowed to go touch, and move that into an electronic system so they'd be able to get to it even if they weren't in the office. That story I've heard more than once. How do you take that paper-based system, or even if in SharePoint or Excel or wherever it is, and move that information into a centralized location that is easily available to the whole organization? So lots of different challenges, and these are just, as I said, 8 that we've put on the screen here. I'm sure that everybody on this call can talk about the challenges you've had specifically with audits. So that's why we're here today. That's what we're getting ready to discuss. That's what, as I will now turn it over to my colleague Tom to take us through the audit management process, and we'll get into, how do we solve a lot of these challenges. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, David. So before I get into the audits process itself, I'd like to do a little bit of an introduction to ETQ Reliance for those attendees that may not be familiar with ETQ Reliance. It's really a web-based, workflow-based business process automation platform that has 42 pre-configured applications that are across 8 different application sets based on your needs for using those applications. It sits on one agile, very configurable platform that uses a drag and drop tool called the ETQ Designer to allow you to configure without programming. So that means that you don't have to be a technical person to be able to administer and manage the use of our system in your organization. And it's all hosted on the cloud-native software as a service, Amazon Web Services environment, so it's easily accessible to anyone in the world. So we've worked with customers for over 30 years now, or almost, just about 30 years with using our software and implementing QMS within their organizations. And there's proven ROI. We have many different case studies that show more engaged users, more productivity, savings of time, savings of money on things like scrap and rework and all kinds of other detailed things, audits, saving time in scheduling and planning audits. Our goal is to empower your organization, so the flexibility and adaptability of ETQ Reliance allows you to drive digital transformation across your organization. It allows you to implement across the entire organization instead of having different instances of the system for different business units or different requirements. Our system allows you to drive what's called harmonization. So you can share one common implementation across the globe, even if not everyone does things exactly the same way. And then from a future-proof perspective, there are really two aspects to this. One is because it's in the Amazon Web Services cloud, we can quickly and easily adapt and ensure that we're using the best of breed technology that's available. But also because of the configurability of the platform, from a process perspective, our system is also considered future-proof because you have needs right now, and not every system is going to have the ability to meet those needs. Because of the configurability of ETQ Reliance, it allows you to meet those needs not just now, but if your needs should change in the future, even for needs that you can't even anticipate in the future, you would be able to literally support those needs with our tool. We're looking at Reliance NXG, which is the next generation QMS. This is going to allow us to focus on certain things. So we've been focusing on certain things from a development perspective as we look at our roadmap. Usability, the user experience is designed to be extremely simple and easy to use. We've already addressed the flexibility concept of our system. It's visibility of information across the entire organization. We also have an analytics layer that we provide as well. And scalability. We have very large customers that can use this system across the globe, multiple languages, multiple business requirements, all set up in the same implementation of our system. But we also have some relatively small customers that can take advantage of what the best in breed tool that we offer. So just a quick look at what is ETQ Reliance. So we talked about the 42 pre-configured applications. This is how we package our system. You might notice that Audits Management is right here. It's one of the core applications with our system. So as you go through your quality journey, different organizations tend to implement different processes at different stages of their journey in the quality world. So the common applications are these 5 that are listed right here. But then we have different application sets that are you could choose to optionally add later. And we'll be talking about different parts of this during our solution series. Next month we have another session that we're going to be doing as well. And all of this sits on the same configurable platform. So I wanted to just mention that. And there's one more thing before I jump into the overview of the audits process, and then we'll jump into a live demonstration here for a moment. Because the system is a platform, it has these 6 powerful genetics or capabilities that are infused across all of the applications on the platform, whether those applications are configured by us as part of the initial pre-configured implementation of our system. And I want to just mention one thing about that. We use our own configuration tool to pre-configure the out-of-the-box applications that we have developed for processes over the last 30 or so years working with different customers. So you can use that as a starting point, but that means that you as the non-technical administrator have the same tools that we use to initially configure the applications to either extend the configurations of any existing processes on the platform and or use it as a development platform to configure your own applications. That's extremely powerful because everything looks and feels the same, and all the applications in our tool have these 6 basic capabilities, which I'm going to quickly discuss now before we get into an overview of the audits process. So adaptability, we've already talked about the high level of configurability in our system. Without programming, you can drag and drop and add new fields to forms and modify workflows and do all kinds of things around that. Connectivity is the relationships between processes. If you think about it, in a real world, you don't just have a separate set of silos that are happening with audits is here, corrective action is over here, non-conformance management is over here, for example. There's a lot of interaction between these processes. And the diagram that I'll be showing shortly will really talk about how audits ties into the bigger picture, but there's also a much bigger picture with other applications that are talking to each other within our system. So I'll touch on this briefly, and then we'll talk on this more in other sessions. Because of the fact that we don't operate in a vacuum, and most organizations have other systems in place where the information is being primarily managed, places like the ERP system, where you have suppliers and customers and products, et cetera. You have HR systems. We can integrate with that to leverage that information. Contextual awareness is very powerful for larger organizations that have the ability to literally allow you to define your own organizational structure. And this is where some organizations struggle when they try to implement a system, because what they end up doing is having separate instances of the same system across their global locations or business units. With our system, you can define your own organizational structure in the form of a hierarchy. And once you would define that hierarchy, that field exists on all records in the system. So you can identify the location that that belongs to, whether it's a physical facility or a business unit or the corporate level. And then individual users are associated with different levels on that hierarchy. So when someone logs in, that's what we mean by contextual awareness. The system knows where they're from, and you could have automatically set it up so they can only see the information that pertains to them. So somebody in a specific location can only see the records that pertain to them. You might have 20 other locations. Each individual set of users from those locations could possibly only see the information that pertains to them, but then their manager that logs in that's higher up in the hierarchy can instantaneously have access to all the information they're responsible for. Extremely, extremely powerful, and allows you to support a large organization, but still have each individual group or location feel like they're working with their own system. In addition, we have this thing called external collaboration, which allows you to extend the use of the system outside of your own users within your organization. Things like suppliers and contractors, for example. They can be set up as users. It actually leverages the same functionality as this contextual awareness I was just describing. Different hierarchical locations for different external users like suppliers or contractors. And therefore, when someone logs in from an external organization, maybe you wanted them to participate in a supplier audit and actually provide their own responses or something like that. You can have them do it live right within the system if you wanted to do that. And then finally, the last genetic that I wanted to refer to is called anywhere access. As I mentioned, our system is hosted in the cloud, so you can access it from any browser on your mobile devices, such as your tablets like Firefox or Chrome, for example. We also have a separate mobility app that you can download for Apple or Android devices, which I plan to give you a quick look at in just a few minutes, which allows you to not only work online, but also gives you the extra capability of going offline. So if you're going to conduct an audit somewhere, like a supplier or a facility where you're not sure if you're going to have access to the web, you don't have to worry about it, because you can literally go online, download or check out those checklists that you're going to be using from the web version, work on it offline. Whenever you're using the web browser or the web app, you can take advantage of the onboard functionality of that mobile device, the voice to text functionality. So you're conducting an audit and you click a button, that microphone that you would usually use to send text messages to friends and family, you can now use it to record your observations as text as you're speaking to your device. And then, of course, objective evidence can be captured in the form of pictures from the camera and then attached right to the record in question. So very, very powerful set of genetics. We're talking today specifically about how to streamline the audit process, but these are applicable to every other process that's available on our platform as well. So I wanted to just take a minute or so to describe that. So now this one other slide is really going to give you a high-level understanding of how our audits application works. And then after we discuss this, you'll have a picture of it in your mind, and then we'll jump into a couple of minutes of a live demonstration in our system. So the audits process, as I mentioned, it's an application that's available within our system. When you first set up the application, you would be able to import all of your existing audit types. So you might have a whole different set of different types of audits that you might be doing: safety audits, quality audits, system audits, compliance audits, supplier audits. They each have their own sets of checklists and questions. You can easily import them right into our system to essentially establish a library of all those checklists and questions and audit types. We also then have an audit planning capability that's available within the system that you could choose to use, which allows you to say, okay, we're going to do a 2022 quality audit plan or a 2022 supplier audit plan, whatever it might be, or even combining them both into one audit plan. It allows you to have a mechanism to have oversight into the proposed plan before you can start scheduling audits. So a lot of our customers do this, and they find it very powerful because it allows you to approve a proposed audit plan. You can adjust the audit plan and by not approving it and sending it back. So you might have 24, 50 audits in a plan. Once you plan the audits and approve the audit plans, you can then start scheduling audits and creating audit records. And there are two ways to do that within our system, because the first one is going to be from an audit plan. So once the audit plan, and only once the audit plan is approved, would an individual that's responsible for that audit be able to schedule that audit because it was approved as part of a plan. But we also allow certain users that you define who have privileges to do this, the ability to schedule ad hoc audits that might happen on the fly. They might be customer audits, they might be third-party audits, they might be other audits that are in response to a corrective action or something like that, where you want to go analyze something a little bit further. We give you the flexibility to do that. And in the case when you're doing that, you still have the ability to select which audit type it is and use checklists that are already predefined. You can also create questions on the fly. And the other thing that a lot of our customers use this for is to manage external audits. So in the case of external audits, you don't have checklists and questions that you're asking, but you still want to schedule the audit. You want to make sure the resources that are internal to your organization are available for the audit. We have the ability to integrate with Outlook Calendar and just send invitations right to the Outlook Calendar for the dates and times that the audits were scheduled. And then you can also use the audit record to capture the information, such as the reports that are provided to you by the third party. And then from there, what you can do is literally launch issues and recommendations and corrective actions. So that's the external audit, but you can also, as I mentioned, use this to manage internal audits. And there's a little symbol to represent the mobile device because you can use a mobile app for that. So you can complete the audits, you can answer the questions in the checklists, and if there are issues that are identified, you have multiple options for ensuring follow-up and ensuring that the issue is dealt with and corrective action is taken. So we have the ability to launch what we call a recommendation. It's really a simple action item that's in the audit's record to alert somebody that something has been observed. It's not an issue or anything, but it might just be a recommendation or a opportunity for improvement, for example. The other option is a brand new application in our system called Quality Events. So when the auditor finds something, they could launch a quality event, which would launch perhaps an investigation, a root cause analysis, maybe a risk assessment to assess what has to be done. And then if deemed necessary, you can launch a corrective action right from the quality event. If it was a supplier audit, you can click a button from the result and find or launch a supplier corrective action record, which could then be using that external collaboration genetic that I referred to earlier. You can send it right to your supplier. They would be able to interact with the system and provide their response right in the system. And then the other option is that you could launch a corrective action right from a finding as well. So what I'm going to be demonstrating in a couple of moments is what it looks like to have someone assigned a step in the corrective action that was launched from an audit. So we'll walk back through the process in the process of doing that. So that's the way I'm going to sort of suggest we approach this time. So that's the conducting of the audit. And then of course, once the audit is completed, we have the ability to create audit reports in several different formats. So you got the results, you got the summary, you got all the details and the notes from the auditors that are being incorporated. You have a list of all the issues that were identified. You can click a button and export this into a PDF format, as well as an Excel spreadsheet using Microsoft Office integration. Office integration is a platform capability that our system has to synchronize any forms with any Excel spreadsheets or audit or Word documents that you want to set up as templates. So in this case, this is going to be the output of the issues in the Excel spreadsheet. The other option is that you can use Office integration to conduct the audit as well. So we provide a lot of flexibility as far as your style of auditing is concerned. So there are probably about 4 or 5 different ways that you can choose to conduct an audit using our system. So one way is the old school way, on paper. So you can literally click a button from a checklist and export it to or print it to a PDF. So if you want to take a clipboard, if you want to take a pen and go out and do your audit, I was literally just talking to a company the other day that still prefers to do it that way, and that's absolutely fine. You can do your audit, you go back to your desk, you type in the results, take your scribble that you had written down on your piece of paper, you transcribe that into the system, and then you start launching records like quality events and whatnot right out of the audit application. The other option is you can be in the web version on the desktop or laptop, and that's what I'll be showing you in a little bit. You can answer the questions there and conduct the audit that way. The other option is using the tablet, the browser on the tablet that I talked about, like Firefox or Chrome. So you're still logged into the system. It's the same user interface as the web version because it is technically the web version. You can do it online using that. You can use the mobility app, and you can also use Office integration that's set up for the audit, not the audit report like I described a moment ago, but the audit itself can also be exported into a spreadsheet, whether it's the whole audit or individual checklists. And then you can either use the checklist yourself in the Excel spreadsheet to provide the responses, or you can send it to somebody else like a supplier. So if it was a supplier questionnaire, they can respond in the spreadsheet. When you reattach the spreadsheet to the record it came from, it pushes their responses right back into the system. So what that really shows is the tremendous amount of flexibility of audit style that we've seen different customers use over the years, and our system gives you a tremendous amount of ability to do that. Finally, once the audit is complete, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about before we jump into a demo here, is that once you complete an audit, you can click a button to schedule the next audit. So based on the type of audit, you can define the frequency for that type of audit, if it's every 6 months or every year or whatever the frequency is. And when you copy an audit, the system not only links the two audit records together, so you can reference back and forth from one to the other very easily, but for any issues, or in fact, for every single question in the system, it allows the auditor the next time to see the response to the question the first time. So it's called previous comments. So for each question, they can see what was done the last time, what was discussed, and then if there are any outstanding issues, open issues from the last time you did the audit, it copies links to those records so that you can use the next audit as an opportunity to circle back and verify what's going on. So that really shows insight into the understanding of the audit process. It turns out that the founders of ETQ 30 years ago were lead assessors for a major registrar before they founded ETQ. So they have a tremendous amount of experience, and that's really reflected in the way our audits application works. So that's the overview of the process. I also have mentioned the mobility app several times, so I'm just going to show you this really quickly, but we'll be seeing this live in just a few minutes. So with that, what I'd like to do is do the demonstration. And in doing that, as I mentioned, what I was planning to do is start with an assignment email. So our system at its core has what's called a workflow. Workflow is a predefined set of process steps that every process has to follow. In this case, this is a corrective action. So I'm not going to spend much time in the corrective action because this is not the topic of our discussion today, but I'm going to use this to get right back to the audit questionnaire or the checklist that this corrective action came from, and then we can discuss the audit process in more detail. So this is what an assignment email looks like. This corrective action is in the implementation step. It's got the due date. It has a subject of the issue, which in this case was the audit question that was being asked at the time. And then there's a hyperlink to the record in question. When I click on it, we do support single sign-on. So if that was implemented, it would bring you right to the record in question. So this is what a typical record looks like in our system. One of the things about the power of the platform is that everything looks and feels exactly the same. So all of our records have a workflow at the top. So this particular corrective action is now in the implementation step because we've already defined an action plan and approved the action plan, and we've delegated different actions to different people. All of our forms have a navigator on the left side, so I can get to the root cause stuff. I can get to the action plan parts right here. So these are the proposed actions that are part of the corrective action, which have their own separate related action items that are technically separate assigned records that are using standard workflow. In addition, we have the last comment. So when this was routed from one step to another, I don't have to communicate with someone separately or call them on the phone or whatever it might be, because the last comment is always visible at the top. So I can collaborate right in the system and know exactly what I'm working on and know what it was that I had to do. But once again, as I mentioned, I'm not going to spend much time in the corrective action, but when someone launched this corrective action from an audit finding in the checklist, it initiated this record in the initiate step all the way on the left side, but it also inherited details from the source record. So we have the ability to have automation built in without having to re-enter information that's already known. So in this case, we knew what the audit question was. We already know what the auditor comment was. We already know the audit information as well. So when someone clicked the button, all this information was automatically inherited by the system. That's part of that connectivity platform genetic that I was referring to a couple of moments ago. So connectivity allows you to define inheritance requirements, and we do have all this pre-configured, but it can be modified easily as well. So it not only does it copy the information into the target record, which in this case is the corrective action, but it provides a hyperlink back to the source record. So in this case, it's an audit finding. It could have just as easily been a nonconformance. It could have been a customer complaint. It could have been any sort of a source issue in any of our other applications that allows you to share the same corrective action process. So here we have a specific checklist in the audit. So this is just one of what could be multiple checklists. We have them separated out into their own records because sometimes you may want to be, let's say, conducting an audit that involves multiple auditors. And in this case, you can delegate different parts of that audit to different auditors to work on at exactly the same time. So this particular checklist has certain questions in it. So I'm just going to show you these questions really quickly. Each question has a hint. It has the auditor's comment. You can also tie it to documents. We have another application in our system called document control. So that's, of course, one of the core applications that I discussed briefly earlier. It allows you to control the creation, review, approval, distribution, and revision of documents. And when you first set up the Audits app and the checklists, you can pre-tie questions to documents and say, okay, this question is actually a document, or excuse me, this is actually a question about a procedure or about a work instruction. So you can either pre-link it, or I can just look it up as we're discussing things with the auditee, and we can link to the documents that we discussed. So that's, once again, a very quick way of attaching things and referencing things using connectivity. We can also attach things. We can drag and drop any number of files, or we can attach things by just browsing out to your local machine or your network or whatever it might be, and attaching that objective evidence to the question. Once again, if you use the camera to take a picture, if you're using the mobility app or the browser on the mobile device, it would attach the picture right to this field as well. In this case, this happens to be the same question that I showed earlier where there was an issue. So it was a major non-compliance. So the auditor was able to pull the term in that was associated to classify it, and they could click a button which launches that corrective action. So the corrective action record, which is number 6, is the same record that I showed earlier. So another part of connectivity is dual linking between related records. So there's full traceability between everything related to an issue and everything that was done to solve that problem and investigate that issue. So I'm not going to click on this because we already talked about the corrective action process. So these are the questions. This is the checklist within the system. I also mentioned the Office integration capability. So you can predefine your own templates in Word or Excel. In this case, Excel lends itself very nicely to doing this because you can capture any number of questions in one spreadsheet. And I'm just going to open this up to show you quickly what it looks like. This is the checklist for, this is the spreadsheet for one checklist, but we also have the ability to do it from the main audit record as well. So this is the Office integration spreadsheet. It literally would allow you to conduct this audit within the spreadsheet. So I can choose from the appropriate response. I can type in the comments. This would be the previous comments from the last time we audited that area. If I was to reattach this checklist, or this spreadsheet, excuse me, to the checklist, it would automatically download or upload all the responses into all the questions that came in from that spreadsheet. So that's really powerful, as I mentioned. I'm just going to click on this link. This is now a link to the parent audit record that's associated with this one checklist. So this is the main audit record. We have all the details around the audit. You can see that this form has a lot of information on it. So we have the checklists that were defined. So this is the one we just looked at, and it has a tally of results as well as a link to the high-level corrective actions and recommendations. We have participants, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of detail here, and I just want to be mindful of time. So this is the audit record itself. This is also tied to an audit plan. So I discussed earlier that we have audit planning functionality within the system. So this is a proposed, or actually an approved, audit plan within our system. It went through an approval step and it's now active. Down here is a link to the, or at least the audit information. In this case, this one was not scheduled yet. So once the audit got approved, the auditor can come in here and schedule the audit from this in the plan. In this case, this is a link to the audit that I was just describing, number 5, which is launched from this particular plan in the audit plan. So that being said, What I'm going to do now is show you the mobile app very quickly, as I promised that I would. And also one more thing. Another key element of any application is not just the workflow in the form, and I mentioned all this can be configured, but we have a thing called a home page. So the home page allows users to see what they're currently assigned to. So as I mentioned, they would receive an assignment email that looks like this initially. So even if they're not logged in, and even if they're not sitting at their desk, they would immediately be alerted to this. The second way that any workflow has to let somebody know that something is assigned is it would show up as an assignment here on their home page. And this user has a lot of assignments, so they're broken up into folders. So here's that same corrective action that's assigned. And I would stay here until I complete it and move it on to the next step, assigning it to somebody else, which would then disappear from my homepage and show up on someone else's homepage. And every record of every open record has two things for every step or phase. It has a due date and it has at least one person or group assigned. That being said, there's full accountability for any process. Our system has a platform level utility called Escalation Management that tracks any upcoming due dates and can send up to 3 levels of reminders as that due date approaches. So level 1 might be 4 days before the due date. It'll send a reminder to the person responsible with another hyperlink to the record to let them know that the due date is approaching. As inferred by the term escalation, 3 days later, which might be 1 day before it's due, it might send it to the person and their manager, which is level 2. Level 3 might be a day after it's due, where the person, the manager, and the manager's manager is notified that something has to be done. So that's really, really powerful. The other aspect of the system is these things called views. So if I open up the audits application, I can see a list of all the open audits. It provides clear visibility into what's going on, easily searchable, so I can see all the current audits that are open and assigned to me or anybody else within the organization. Makes it extremely easy to see what's going on within the system. So with that being said, I'm going to log out of the web version, and I'm going to pull up a screen that's actually going to share my mobility app. So I have my telephone right here, and I have my screen. You can see that I have the ETQ Reliance mobility app. It's just downloadable from the Apple or the Google stores. And then when I click on it, in this case, I'm online, so I can log in. So I'm just logging in very quickly here. So this is going to give me my list. In this case, I'm looking at just the audits that are going on, so I can look at the checklists that are currently assigned to me. The other option is I can come to the list of applications. I can search for that particular checklist. So I'm going to search for it by just starting to type in part of the title. And I can see that it comes up here. And if you'll notice, if I swipe to the left, this is what's going to give me the capability of downloading it from the web version to my local device if I wanted to go someplace offline. So what it literally does is it checks it out of the web version so somebody can't accidentally edit it online. It alerts them to who checked it out and when they checked it out. I can work on it offline, and then when I'm done, I can upload it back into the web version. In this case, for the purposes of our discussion, just for brevity purposes, I'm going to do it right online. So this is the same checklist and the same questions that I showed you a few moments ago from the web version. So the auditor would be able to, click here and then either type in their comments or click on the microphone button and record what they've identified. And they could even come down to the attachments field right here, and they can click on this, which would allow them to take a picture. So I can point out my back window here, I can snap a picture, and then if I say okay, it now attaches that photo right to the question as objective evidence that I just identified. And then when I finish, I can either hit the send button to move it on to the next step in the workflow for approval or review. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to hit the save button on the top and save the record that I just updated within the system. So David, I think that's what I wanted to cover for the demonstration.
Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. As I said, we all have to go through audits, and having a system that can help manage those audits more effectively can only be a productivity enhancer, can really streamline the operations and make your audit results much more effective, reduce the number of findings. You get a couple of areas for improvement, but no longer have to worry about as many CAPAs. At least that's what my experience has been personally with some of the audits that I've been through. So before we get into the question and answers, I want to do a quick overview of ETQ. I know we just want to give you a little idea of the rest of the environment that Tom was talking about. You know, ETQ Reliance is our quality management system. And when we look at quality, we really look at it across the entire product lifecycle. And I think when you think about audits, they can occur at any stage and do occur at every stage of the product delivery and beyond even. And I think it's really critical to understand that when we think about quality, we need to think about it from the time we start with product design, dealing with our suppliers, you know, as we go through the whole manufacturing process and are measuring, you know, products that come off the assembly line, and how do we make sure that, you know, we deal with any non-conformances that occur there, to the next step, which is logistically getting those products out into the market, selling them through the sales process, and then finally, you know, getting customer feedback as customers actually get hands on products, and making sure that we're delivering the highest level of quality to those customers. I think, you know, when we look at the QMS, audits is just one part of a much broader set of capabilities to make sure that we are hitting our quality objectives at every step of the process. To help do that, ETQ has, as Tom said, 42 different applications, and we kind of lay it out more as a journey. And you'll see on the next slide that we start pretty small and focused with our customers, and then help them grow over time. So maybe we start with document control or training management, audits management as some of the core capabilities. But over time, we find that our customers want to add more capabilities, whether it's non-conformance handling, we deal with new product introduction, we deal with supply chain, as we move to the right on this journey and eventually get to, you know, being able to manage from a global perspective. And we get to this point of quality transformation, which leads into the larger corporate goals that a lot of organizations have these days on digital transformation. And speaking of a lot of different organizations, that's one of the benefits our customers have of dealing with ETQ, is that we deal with a lot of different vertical industries, and we share best practices across those industries. Here's just a few, but it allows information sharing to become much more effective when you have a system that's used in a lot of different vertical markets. And our customers get together on a regular basis and talk to each other and share ideas, and really can help each other move the whole industry forward from a quality management perspective. And then speaking of customers, I just want to, I think, talk about one or two other, at least one other customer here, a specific customer that has in fact implemented ETQ Reliance and taken advantage of the audit capabilities, and they've seen some real savings. And this is Avanos, their medical device provider, and in their audit process, they went from a very manual to a very automated approach in terms of information collecting and processing and running an audit. And they see $500,000 of savings from that, just from that process. A lot of that is in streamlining the operations. A lot of it is in having that information available, so we're not spending time creating or recreating documents. We're not spending time searching for information. We're not pulling in lots of different people from across the organization just to help make sure we have all the right answers at our fingertips. And so you see that they've actually reduced the amount of time, lead time, up to an audit by 92%. And so not only does that help them have the information available, but it gives the auditors more confidence that the information they're getting from Avanos, especially since, you know, they're in the life science business and one of those auditors happens to be the FDA every once in a while, that they are meeting their compliance mandates, that they are able to they're able to respond to any sort of question that an auditor has. And that means that the auditors have more confidence, as I said, that they know what they're doing and that they're reducing the risk of human error. And that long-term leads to better patient outcomes. So you can draw this whole connection from being better prepared and collecting information and doing quality right through the audit to patient outcomes. Okay. When we look at the value of the quality management system, especially when we look at audits, we did a research project a couple of years ago with a bunch of our customers, and we looked at where they were seeing the value specifically around audit management. This is part of a larger project where we looked at the value across a number of different areas of the quality management system. And when it came to audit management, as we just saw with Avanos, it's really around reducing the risk of noncompliance, where they save time spent on planning and executing the audits, and also supporting external audits, because they do a lot of audits. Our customers do a lot of audits with their suppliers, and they also get audited by external organizations, not just suppliers, but also regulatory agencies, whether it's like the FDA or OSHA or other organizations. And it helped them reduce the number of audit findings. When I talked about confidence in the audit process, it also means that the auditors believe you more. And that's what I have found, is that they have confidence in the answers you're giving, and you're less likely to get significant audit findings, and reduces the number of CAPAs, for example. So I think that's really an important part. And then if we go on the next slide, we can actually quantify what that means. So Avanos was able to measure, $500,000 in savings and 92% time reduction up for preparing for an audit. But across a broader set of customers, we've seen a 20% reduction in time spent planning for and reporting on audits, 50% reduction in time spent supporting external audits, and a 50% reduction in the number of audit findings. And that all can lead to improved productivity. Your people aren't simply there to support audits, but can focus on more strategic activities as well. All right, so giving you a quick overview of ETQ, we've talked about the audit process. I now know that it's time for Q&A, and we've gotten a few questions that have come in. Tom, I'm gonna jump over to my question list here. And in fact, from Liz, we had a couple of questions. You have any tips for internal auditors? So let's put yourself on the other side of the table now. Now you're an auditor. Any tips for those auditors that you might want to mention here?
That's interesting, very broad kind of.
Yeah,
Is this
start
a
off,
question? Are you guys razzing me, or is this a real question?
This is a real question, sir.
Well, I mean, at a very high level, if I would say just be curious. If you're an auditor, you have your checklists and whatnot, but you also probably know what you're doing and you know your company. So if you have a certain intuition about something, don't hesitate to ask about it, because there's a good chance that your intuition is right. So you don't have to be locked into the checklist. The checklist is there to help you, but the checklist doesn't have to restrict you either. It's just a tool. So auditing can be a lot of fun, because it gets you out there and get you to see different parts of the organization that you might have not otherwise seen. Or if you're a supplier auditor, if you like to be a road warrior, you can go to all these different places and meet a lot of great people.
Okay, great. Another question, there are a couple of questions specific to ETQ Reliance. The first is, if a company purchases the core applications, does that meet the audit needs, or do we need to get anything else? Do we need other applications to support audits?
You do not need anything else. In fact, when you get the core, you get audits and you get corrective action as part of it, as well as 3 other common applications. But for the context of this discussion, as David mentioned on the quality journey slide, you get the applications for the core requirements for quality management: document control, training, audits, corrective action, and change management. So those are all part of the core. There's no additional cost because that's part of the core system.
All right, great. Thank you, Barbara, for that question. Another one, this comes from Jeffrey. Is there a capability to perform trending on past findings?
Yes, there is. We have an ETQ Insights tool. That's an analytics tool that allows you to have dashboards that look at trending. They can be set up to look at different aspects of it in your own way that you might require. But we also provide some examples of things that can be used just predefined in the system. So trending that's a really intuitive question, because if you think about a QMS like ours, you can manage processes very well with connectivity and all the other stuff. But as you're doing things, you're categorizing them. You have completion times versus actual times it should have taken to complete. All that kind of information is available for analytics using our ETQ Insights tool.
Great. Now, a question that had previously, do we have examples of different industries, use cases and case studies on audits?
I'm sure we have a lot of stories that can be told with our customer base. We don't have any, the formal case studies. We have a list of case studies that are here. These are just some samples, but we can look for that, David, and see what we have. But
yep,
for our ETQ customers that are out there, there's also ETQ community, which gives you the ability to collaborate with any of our other customers on any other information that you'd like. Okay. So there are lots of resources available to you.
Yep. And let me just remind everybody while we're going through the Q&A here, please just use the GoToWebinar widget on the right-hand side of the screen if you want to ask a question. I got one from Art. What does implementation look like? How long does it take? How do I start to prepare?
That's a good question. It's also kind of open-ended as well. It depends on the complexity of your program and the audits that you have. But our goal with anything with our system is to empower you as the customer to run the show. You don't have to be beholden to us for everything that has to be done. So the audits application, even though the system is highly configurable and you might configure it for corrective actions or complaints, but the audits application tends to not be configured very much because it's all about setting up your own audit types in the system. So the audit, you would basically do imports from Excel to pull in all your existing audit types and all your questions and checklists. So there may be a little bit of time involved in setting that up. But typically, if we were to implement, let's say, audits and corrective action, which are two companion apps that often go hand in hand, and a lot of our customers would implement those first, it's probably, depending on your industry, whether you require validation or not, it could be 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks for an implementation of those two processes. Without validation, the time might be doubled if you require validation, because as you know, validation is a little bit of a process too, but we also provide services to assist you with that as well.
Okay, great. Another question that had previously come in, we talk about doing a lot of this as internal audits. Is there a difference in the approach that you've seen, Tom, with doing supplier audits?
Not necessarily. One thing that we have seen in some situations is, you might recall when I showed you the checklist, there was a question and then there was a comment for the auditor. We've seen some customers configure a supplier response field before the comment field on the form because they want to, maybe as pre-planning, they'll let the supplier respond to some of the questions and give them some information as an input before you go on site to do the supplier audit. So it gives you a little bit of a leg up. Instead of just going in there cold, you have some information ahead of time to start with, and that's a pretty simple configuration that can be done. That's what we've seen. We've seen supplier audits be on site. I was referring to the Road Warrior, and I was kind of joking around because I myself, prior to COVID, was on a plane quite a bit, and saw a lot of people working on their audit reports on their laptops on the airplane. It's unbelievable how often I would see that happen, because that's a common thing, but also remotely. You can do a lot of audit information and things like that remotely now.
Right. Okay. Another question that I've seen has come in. You did talk about configuration. You talked about maybe not doing a lot, but do I have to do that myself? Does ETQ provide help with getting things configured?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So because we have 42 applications that you could implement on our platform, we typically do a phased approach with you. So let's say audits and corrective action were the first two applications that you wanted to implement. We would typically do a project with you to implement that from soup to nuts. So we do requirements gathering, We document what you're proposed to do and how it might be configured. Before we even touch anything, we get agreement on that. And then we would go, our own implementation consultants would do the configuration for you. And the end of the project, which we call go live, you would have 2 applications that are fully configured for your own requirements. But while we were doing that project, you as administrators are using our ETQ Academy, which is an online learning management platform, not just end users to learn how to use it in a user role, but also administrate or administer an administrator's role to learn how to configure the system. So at the end of the first phase, we typically take a wait and see approach to see if you want us to help you with more services, we can. You don't have to. We would prefer not to because you guys can do it yourselves. And that's a very kind of efficient way of doing it and an economical way of doing it because you're not paying us for additional services. You can, if our goal is to empower you as the customer to be able to manage our system moving forward. And because all the other apps look and feel the same as the first 2, and that's why I kind of highlighted the genetics and the platform concept in many different, or as different parts during our discussion, you can literally you don't have to be dependent on us to configure additional apps. We're here to help if you want, but it's not required.
And one final question. I've done my audits. I've got this. I've got all these great findings, or maybe not so great, depending on your perspective. I think you talked earlier, but that information that's collected, where can I send it? Where can I use it next?
A couple things. You can use it in either your events, quality events, or your corrective actions through trending and analytics to see what kinds of issues you're having. We've also seen customers configure lessons learned processes pretty simply in the system because you have all this information. It's almost like a wealth of information. It's like what you're learning this stuff. It's gold, and it's available for other people to reference, almost like a knowledge base, if you will. So I showed a view before, but we've seen views where people have the problem, the solution, any recommended actions that have to take place. You learn from your own experience. And because of the visibility of information within the ETQ Reliance platform, you can make it readily available for others to see. And David, this is starting to scratch the surface a little bit of almost like artificial intelligence, because if you think about a problem and a solution, our system can learn what those solutions are and even make recommendations for future problems that are occurring to give you guidance on what others have done within your own organization to solve those problems. So instead of reinventing the wheel every time there's an issue, you can use from your own institutional learning to just share the good news, if you will.
That's terrific. Tom, thank you so much. This has been really insightful. Appreciate your taking time to share all about audits today with myself and with everybody on the call. If we just flip to the next slide, as I said, this is a series of sessions that we are holding, and the next one in October, we'll give you the exact date, right? Is it have it in there? No, probably late in October. We will target new product introduction, which has a number of capabilities to help organizations do design and supplier help with a supplier understanding of what you're trying to build and get those products into the market in a more timely fashion with high quality. So we will see you again in a month to continue our walk through different quality solutions that are available. Thank you again, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day.